welcome to another edition of the PRC Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 9. My name is Jake, and I'm your host. In addition to my co-host and friend Ryan of RJM Analytics, David is with us for the first time since the Daytona 500 episode. And back for appearance number 3 of the year is one of our originals, Murb, who we've known for a decade now, give or take. And it's good to have you guys back. This weekend was the so-called greatest weekend in racing, with both F1 and IndyCar's most prestigious events being run Sunday, and after a postponement from some putrid weather, the Coke 600, a very pertinent event in its own right, happened for the NASCAR boys yesterday. So there's a lot to cover. Can't promise we'll get to all of it, but we'll try to get to as much of it as we can. So I'll toss it over to my colleague here to get us started.
Yeah, we all kind of agreed before this that we would nip the bullshit that happened yesterday in the bud, and so I'll just say it was really stupid on Chase's part. Only has himself to blame for the suspension, but that being said, I think NASCAR really needs to draw a line in the sand somewhere about what is and isn't suspension worthy or penalty worthy, because it's don't do it under caution and you're good. And it's, don't admit that it was on purpose and you're good. Now I guess it's, make sure that the guy you wreck isn't the loudest, most hypocritical crybaby in the garage, and otherwise you're good. Because, we know if Chase does that to probably, if he does that to Tyler Reddick or Christopher Bell or Chase Briscoe, nothing comes out of it. But, whatever. It's, again, he only has himself to blame. And that being said, Corey LaJoie, really excited for him, and I'm excited for you, Jake, mainly because you've been waiting for this for a while for him to get an opportunity like this, and really hope he makes the most of it. I hope he finishes ahead of the 11 car more than anything.
Yeah, concerning the controversy, capital T, capital C, I'm glad we're getting this out of the way. I didn't want to spend a great deal of time talking about it, but I will echo what Ryan said. It's just that Chase did something rather foolish and impulsive, and he's facing the consequences for it. And we'll see him in 2 weeks. But in the meantime, I'm glad for Corey LaJoie. And considering what he's done in much lesser quality equipment, I think he might even have a legitimate shot to run up towards the front, maybe even contend. We'll see. It's certainly a great opportunity for him. And as far as the consistency of the penalty goes, I think if we bear in mind the recent Bubba Wallace suspension for his wrecking Kyle Larson, right? I think if NASCAR can get some consistency going as far as that, because they were similar incidents, right? Then we can start.
But then there was also Hocevar last year at IRP and Gragson at Road America or whatever it was. So
that's true.
It really just feels like with both this and Bubba that you only suspended them because the backlash, if they didn't, would have been, oh, you're playing favorites.
That's true. Well, I do agree that there does need to be some consistency now, and especially, I'll admit, like my favorite driver of all time, Jeff Gordon did this same thing back in Phoenix 2012, and that was not pretty, and he took out 2 other drivers, and it was just definitely, I know Murb thinks he should have been suspended for that too, and that's true. It was a pretty ugly move. So it was definitely, these things it's just not a good look on the racetrack. Some people dig it. But it is very expensive and kind of petty to cause that much damage and that much work for another team for the sake of what? Chase didn't even get away scot-free. He ended his own race. So, but anyway, we can all talk about that in due course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. I guess I'm glad ultimately that Chase got suspended. I think he should have been. As far as I'm concerned, like right hooking anybody, I think that's an automatic. I think it should be an automatic 1 race suspension. Like I was in favor of it for Bubba. I thought Hocevar should have been. I guess both times he's done it now. I'll talk about Hocevar in a minute. playing into this as well, obviously with him driving the 7 now. But yeah, like I think that's an automatic suspension. I think that should be the rule. Like it's obvious when these guys do it on purpose. There's never really like, oh, did he do it on purpose or did he not? Like every time this has happened, it's always been like extremely obvious. So that's my take on that. But anyway, I'm excited for Corey to get that chance. I was hoping when Chase was out with the injury that they would have done this, have him in the 9 and then just like whoever in the 7. So I'm excited to see what he can do.
That, believe me.
Yeah. I suppose it's maybe a little unfortunate for Corey that it's happening at Gateway, like his one shot, because that was probably Hendrick's worst race last year. And honestly, like I'm not really sure what types of tracks he excels at, just because he's always been, driving these like shoestring budget cars. So I really don't know what to expect from Corey. So I'm excited for that. And as far as Hocevar in the 7 goes, like I have not been a fan of a lot of things that Hocevar has done over the last year, but I'm still incredibly high on his talent. So I'm also excited to see that. I think he's been great from what I've seen in the Xfinity car for Spire. So it's going to be an interesting weekend to see how those two guys do. And I guess adding a little bit of a wrinkle to a race that I think a lot of us probably were just, before all this happened, kind of like putting on the back burner because it's Gateway, But I don't know. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, a lot to unpack here. I'll try to get through it as concisely as I can. As far as the incident itself, which, again, we didn't really want to spend that much time about, I can't defend what Chase did if it was intentional, and I would say there's probably a 78% likelihood that it was. I can't say with 100% certainty, but he probably did it intentionally. But I don't know how to put this. I didn't like it, but I'm not really morally outraged about it either because of who it happened to. We've talked enough about Denny Hamlin and the kind of guy that he is and what all our thoughts on him are. We don't really need to repeat it. All I really need to say is I've got zero sympathy for him in these kind of situations. And he reached possibly a new low with his douchiness this time. Apparently, anybody that spoke out against him got blocked on Twitter. Now, I've been part of the Blocked by Denny Twitter club for close to a year now. I mouthed off to him about some stuff with Ross last year, and he
hasn't blocked me though.
Yeah, that's interesting, but
still going after that achievement award there with.
But anyways, yeah, he really was. I mean, he was blocking all replies, and he blocked many people, fairly high-ranking people in NASCAR Twitter that had not even been corresponding with him. But whatever, that's who he is, and that's what he is. We all know that. As far as Chase goes, I want to preface this by saying that Chase is, by and large, a clean driver, one of the cleaner guys out there. But I wasn't shocked by it necessarily because he does, and this is kind of an inside joke that we have in our community that I kind of started a few years ago, that, it's kind of half joking and half serious, but he does kind of have a little bit of a covert, devious side to him that comes out every now and again, and I guess this was probably the biggest example of that. Like I said, I don't have a huge problem with it in itself as long as it's not a continued pattern of behavior. My biggest problem with it, which is something that I've kind of touched on before, is that this was kind of another sign of, I think, Chase having this belief that the world is against him. Like, he's just been in a really negative state of mind now, it seems like, for quite a while. And I don't know whether it's because he has something going on in his personal life or whether it's just that he hates this race car, as he continues to say. But, his attitude is probably the biggest impediment to his results right now, why he has not been as good in the last probably half a year's worth of races. I thought maybe after the injury and he came back that it would kind of give him a shot in the arm, but didn't really seem to change things. Maybe this will be the thing that fires him up. I don't know. We'll have to see. But his attitude has got to improve if he's going to do better and get the results that he's capable of. And I think it will at some point. But that's just the kind of thing where, like Byron, like I've noticed that he never had a bad attitude, but he's went from being this kind of guy that just blends in the background to one of like the most confident guys in the racetrack. I would say in his interviews, I won't say that he's cocky, but he definitely comes off as having a high degree of confidence that has helped his results this year, and that's kind of, at least temporarily, vaulted him ahead of Chase in the Hedrick totem pole. I expect that to change, again, before long, but that's something that's got to happen. But I'm sure that he'll take this off week and spend it well and, look over the things he needs to, and I expect him to be a contender, maybe as soon as Sonoma, but who knows exactly when. And then, yes, Corey being in the car, he should have been in it when Chase was out the first time instead of Josh Berry, but, that's the way it goes. I remember I got flamed pretty hard by some people for suggesting that Corey could get the car, even though Mike Joy literally was pumping it up as a possibility. I literally got called special for suggesting that he could possibly get a ride with Hendrick, or at least a deal with Hendrick being under contract for Spire, but as we see, that was not the case. Now, it just happened to work out in Corey's favor this time that Josh Berry was racing across the country in Portland, and so that was fortuitous for him. I don't really have a whole lot else to say other than I've been waiting for this opportunity for a long time. I wish it was at a different racetrack. As Murb was saying, this is probably the worst track that there is for Hendrick, and I'm just trying to enjoy it. It's kind of been a blur today. I haven't really processed it yet. I've not going to go into detail. I've kind of had a bad day today, not a good one. It's been a long one, and so I'm tired, and I really needed that today, something good like that, and I'm enjoying it for now. I'm going to get nervous when it's time for the race weekend because I know this may very well be his last chance to prove himself and get his future situation squared away and improved. But I'm looking forward to it, and as David or one of you guys said, it actually gives me one reason to look forward to this race, which otherwise I was thoroughly dreading. So I've gone on long enough, so I guess that's about it.
Yeah, my main Chase takeaway here is pretty much exactly what you said. Well, other than that, nobody better ever call him the Golden Boy ever again after this. But yeah, he really needs to just, it really goes back to the end of last year and that whole, sort of gloomy attitude he had about the car, and his performance was down a little bit, and now it's continued into this year, and he had the injury excuse, but now it's like, if there's a real chance he's going to miss the playoffs, he's got to step it up and start acting like he was a couple of years ago when he was just not taking shit from guys and being just, this confident sort of, I'm going to be one of the best drivers in the sport, and, it's clear that he's fully invested. He needs to go back to that instead of just this, sort of miserable attitude and using his car as a weapon. You can stand up for yourself without doing that, and it needs to go along with just, driving like the guy he's capable of driving like.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's enough on him.
One last thing I want to say that I didn't get to about the issue of the penalty consistency. I agree with all that, but asking NASCAR to be consistent is like asking a dog not to kill chickens. It's just not going to happen. It's never going to. We talked about the incidents that have happened over the last year and a half, the different ones that have happened with guys hooking others on the racetrack and causing all the carnage. In my opinion, the worst one of all of them was what Braxton did at Road America, and he didn't get basically any penalty at all. And, we've had all these different varying takes on it that have been given by NASCAR, and it's really frustrating, but, I think they got it right in this case, but, because of their past history, you just can't really have any confidence in anything that they say, and so I guess that's it.
Yeah, I was going to talk about a different Chase, though, while we're kind of think we're done with that. But Chase Briscoe, what in the world, man? I mean, is there any explanation at all for how he's been running this past month and really all year outside of the short tracks? I mean, I get like Stewart-Haas is slow, but for him to be that much off of even like Preece and Almirola each week, that's just I do not get this guy at all.
It's been pretty baffling for sure. Like, I've made this comparison several times, like in our chat, but to me, he's basically doing like a speed run of like Jeremy Mayfield's 1998 to 2005. Since beginning of last year, I guess we would say up till now. Like, when he's good, he's really good. Like, as we've seen, he won that race at Phoenix last year. The Bristol dirt races, both years, Martinsville, of course, Stewart-Haas all 4 of them were great there, but he was up there all day pretty much. So, like, when he's good, he's really good. And then when he's bad, a lot like Mayfield back in the day, it is, like, among the biggest embarrassments in the field. So I definitely don't really have an answer. I know for a while I was definitely, like, defending him because, especially earlier at some of those intermediates, and we all know Stewart-Haas is just garbage on the intermediates mostly. But I guess it was like Fontana in Vegas maybe. He had maybe like some engine issues or whatever. So I was like, okay, I'll give him benefit of the doubt for that. And then he broke his finger. And he said that was been bothering him. So I'm like, okay, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on that. But I mean, at this point, we're over a third of the way through the season now. And it's just like, at a certain point, like you said, Ryan, like that far off of Preece and Almirola, who I don't think any of us really hold in that high regard at this point. Like, I don't know. It's pretty baffling.
Yeah, I would correct me if I'm wrong, but Briscoe did have a pretty decent run at the All-Star race. I mean, he finished 4th, right? He was doing, and that pretty well reflected his performance all day, but that just makes his performance on the whole, and especially this last not Sunday but yesterday, just all the more atrocious, really. And yesterday in particular, like I was the first one to point it out. Just like it was shortly after the race had started, and I mentioned that he was running 34th, like, and this was just. And I particularly was noticing it because I haven't picked for our sort of our predictions game as my primary driver for some inexplicable reason, something I will kick myself for the rest of the year for. But it's been I sort of lack explanation beyond what's been said already. But it seems like there's got to be a better driver in there somewhere. But we're not seeing it right now.
I guess the only explanation is just that, if he has a good car, then he's fine. But if he has a bad car, then he just, like, doesn't even try at all. I've never, in all my time watching NASCAR, seen a driver who's more dependent on whether or not his car is good or not than he is.
I don't know if I would say he's not trying. I think that's like I don't know how any of these guys operate like mentally or whatever, so I'm not gonna like speculate on that. But it's definitely a phenomenon we've talked about before, like what you're saying. Like guys when they have good cars, I guess it's like who's a product of their equipment and who's not. Like we typically hold guys who are like taking shit boxes, to victory lane, and we're gonna talk about Ryan Blaney, like. This Penske year and Ford, what they've had has not been great this year, and I think Blaney's been amazing, and we'll get to that, in a few minutes. But we talk about it all the time. Like some guys are just like this, I guess. Like if they have a good car, they can run well, and if they don't, then there's not much maybe raw talent that's like elevating the car to that next level. I don't know what it is, but then he's a guy that like I feel like him coming from that background of his like sprint cars and dirt racing and stuff, like I feel like most of those guys tend to be the ones that do elevate slower cars, I want to say, or I guess they have that natural like raw talent that can take slower cars to another level. So I don't know. There's some sort of disconnect here, and obviously, again, Stuart Haas is not not in a good spot right now, and it doesn't, from all the rumors we've seen of who their drivers are going to be next year, it doesn't look like it's going to get much better for them. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
I don't really have a whole lot to add other than I agree with pretty much everything that's been said. I want to ask: is he still in the playoffs at this point in the points in the grid, or
I just looked at that actually earlier. He's now, I believe, in 17th.
Like, yes, he is.
Yeah, that's
Coming past him.
That's still ridiculous. But what are you going to do? We've talked about SHR. Seems like every episode on this show, and so there's not really any more that I can say that's not just beating a total dead horse at this point. The whole team has been slow, but he's definitely been noticeably worse and bad. And I think he's ranked right at the bottom, or right near the very bottom of Ryan's metrics almost all the weeks recently. But then he'll have this random week like the All-Star race last week, where he ran in the top 5 and was really good the whole time, and was ahead of all of his teammates, and you just don't know what to think of him. I don't really have any other explanation. I don't really think that the injury would be the problem, because I mean, finger injury can be bad and very painful, and especially when you have to hold it, on the wheel the whole time, the whole race. But at the end of the day, I don't think it's something that is that big of a deal. I don't really know what else to speculate on. I mean, he's not the most fit driver that there is. I'm not, trying to make fun of him, because I'm definitely not fit myself. But let's just say he's one of the more rotund guys on the circuit, and maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe he's just not physically cut out for some of these races, especially these longer ones like the 600. We can only just theorize, really. But he'll come back at some point. I don't see him really doing much of anything this season, though.
Yeah, actually, Avery Hage, who's been on our show before, posted just a couple hours ago the green flag speed ranking of non-drafting paved ovals, so everything except for Daytona, Talladega, Atlanta, Bristol, and Austin, and he is 28th in average speed on those tracks out of 31 drivers in competitive cars. So, yeah.
Yeah. I guess, one more thing, thinking about Briscoe that's kind of puzzling to me is, like, and again, we've mentioned, or I guess I mentioned before, like, Stuart Haas has been, really since 2021, they've been god-awful on the intermediates. Like, really, all of their speed has been, these short ovals.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, because that was coming off of 2020, where Harvick, like, had that huge run on the intermediates. It was like every intermediate we went to, we thought, it was like, how many laps is Harvick going to lead, and what's the margin of victory going to be by? But I don't know. There's a lot of like kooky stuff going on with that team, but Briscoe particularly, like when he was in Xfinity, he was a really good intermediate driver. Like he was winning all over at like Vegas and Kansas and places like that.
It was kind of the opposite. Like he was not that good on short tracks then.
Right. That's what I was getting at. Like the short flat tracks right now, like from 2022 to present, like that's what he's been doing all of his best stuff on in Cup. Like David mentioned Wilkesboro, he was good there. Martinsville, obviously he's a dirt guy, so Bristol dirt, I guess maybe came naturally to him. But I don't know. I'm not really getting to a point. I'm just saying it's kind of puzzling. It seems like now I guess maybe it coincides with just the tracks that Stuart Haas is strong at, and maybe that goes back to what we were saying earlier. Like Stuart Haas has good cars at the short flat ovals, like Phoenix and Martinsville, whatever. So he's going to be good there because he has a good car, and I guess he's going to be shitty as long as they have shitty cars on the intermediates. I don't know, but it's definitely one of the more puzzling things I've seen in a while.
Yeah, I would agree. It's when I was looking at his stats, I saw that he was 17th. I just thought it almost seems like the system is overrating him a bit. But if not for the strength of those three top fives in a row at Bristol, Dirt, Martinsville, Talladega, right? He would not be. It wouldn't even look this good, right? So it's just very, very much a polarizing sort of look down the results column, at least in the finishing, at least in the finishes, of course. But yeah, it's everything's been said just bears out in the at least in the results, right? 7th at Phoenix, 5th at Martinsville, 109 laps led there. So just very strange, but that's all.
I don't remember where he finished at. I know that top 5 at Talladega was after he was laps down for a lot of the race after he spun on pit road. Guess that's his only really egregious finish, way better than he deserved to race. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. Let's talk about Blaney though.
Can I just add?
I'll give you the first.
Real quick. I just want to say, I still don't want to rip on Briscoe super hard. I still think he can be a good Cup driver.
Oh yeah.
Eventually. I do too.
I still think he can. I still think he can end up with a decent amount of wins and have a good career. What I'm now questioning is what the hell Stuart Haas is doing, but we don't need to get into that. Anyway, I just want to say that I think he's still going to be a good driver, and I don't think this is going to be super indicative of his future, even though it's really weird right now.
Yeah, one last thing I want to add on that is this is sort of like how his Xfinity career was, where he seemed to really struggle and it didn't look like he was actually that good, and then suddenly 9-win season in 2020, probably should have won the championship that year. So there's time for him. I don't know just how good he's going to be, but he has a pattern of struggling for a while and then kind of bursting out.
Yeah. It's going to be one of those. It might be one of those Joey Logano type situations where he languishes for a few years with one team, and then he just switches and immediately breaks out. Right. Maybe that's what needs to happen, because as has been said multiple times already, I mean, Stuart Haas is just not up to snuff right now. So
maybe once Kevin buys the team and it becomes Delana Harvick Racing, then he can finally live up to his potential. I was gonna transition to this into Blaney, right? For a guy who is making the most out of a team that's having a down year. And Murb, you want to kind of get started there since he's your guy?
I can. He's definitely one of my favorite drivers, I guess, I would say.
I still think of you as the resident Blaney guy, even if you're more of a Reddick or Bowman fan.
He's probably I don't know. He's definitely in my top 4, Reddick, Bowman, Bubba Wallace, Blaney, kind of. But anyway, I thought this was the best race of his career, by a pretty wide margin, because I guess I'll go backward. I've been really, really impressed with him the past, probably, I don't know when it started, but at least probably a month or so. I just think, and it's largely has to do with what Logano's been doing. I think Logano has largely been trash, other than the drafting races, Daytona, Talladega, Atlanta. He, especially for coming off of last year, where I thought Joey, in my opinion, last year was the best year of Joey's career. Just because I don't think Penske's been that good for a while now. Probably since 2020. I don't think they've been. I mean, obviously they're still one of the best teams, but they're not what they were a few years ago. And so now with Blaney, I've been super impressed with just how much he's been outrunning his teammates and really the rest of Ford. And that's another kind of thing we could go into. Maybe is just how bad Ford's been. They did have some moments in the 600, which I thought was interesting, given their lack of intermediate speed this year. At one point, I remember seeing they were like 1 through 5, like when Buescher was leading for a little while or whatever. But yeah, I mean Blaney, I thought was the best race of his career by far. Like he just, he's dominated races before, but he's never really closed out the ones that he's dominated. Normally, the ones he wins are the ones where he's kind of just like lurking around, maybe like top 5, top 10, and then all of a sudden he's there at the end and he wins. He's never really like closed out one of these like super domination races where he's like by far the best car. So it was cool to see that. And for me, like, I'm interested to see if this is going to be something that kind of unlocks him going forward. And because I think he's capable of having big seasons as long as the equipment's right. And I don't know if that'll happen this year because, again, I don't think Penske's that good right now. But, I think he's capable of having, like, great championship caliber seasons. So it'll be interesting if this is, like, something we look back on in a few years is like, oh, man, that 600 win is kind of like what jump-started the next few years of his career. Or I could see it going either way. Or I could see it just being kind of like, yeah, he has this, and then, maybe it's like one of those Casey Kane 600 wins. I know Kyle Petty that was comparing him to Kane last year? And it was a big controversy. I don't know. But, I don't know. It could go either way. It could be something that, like, springboards him into, like, this whole other elite level, or it could just be, like, one and done. I don't know. It's going to be interesting, but either way, I thought it was a really awesome race by him.
Yeah. I would say maybe not his best race ever, but definitely his best win ever. Only other one that's really even in that conversation is that time in Atlanta when he ran down Larson after Larson had dominated. But I don't even really think he was the best car yesterday. Think he had the best drive for sure, but definitely seemed like Reddick was a lot faster than him at certain points. And Bell, Truex, all the Toyotas seemed like the class of the field. The other guy probably would have been up there if he didn't get wrecked. So even Gibbs was up in the top 5 for a while, and then he got caught up in the Larson wreck late in the race. But it just really seems like Blaney, for all his flaws in the past of, he's easily rattled and doesn't bounce back well from adversity, not really very consistent sometimes. It really seems like ever since around, I don't know when I first kind of started noticing him this year, maybe at Dover, it had to have started before that, maybe since the Bristol dirt race.
Yeah, he was good there. I remember him and Joey were both really good at Fontana, I felt like. They were kind of like both top 5 cars from what I remember. And then it kind of just seemed like the whole team nosedived, other than they dominated Atlanta. But I do remember Dover being one, because that's not been a good track.
Dover was the first one where I'm he's clearly just that much better than his teammates. Joey was just out to lunch that day, and Cindric wrecked or something, and Blaney was top 5 for all of it. But it was before that slowly starting to build up, but now it's he's clearly carrying Penske this year, and he's clearly at a point right now where he's putting it all together. He's not throwing in the towel if his crew has a bad pit stop or anything. And to their credit, his crew has been better too. They just had that one bad stop yesterday, but other than that, they were mainly keeping him at least maintaining track position. I absolutely think, and I think the top 3 for this year are still Byron, Larson, Reddick, in whatever order you want to put them in. But Blaney, I think, has pretty clearly entered that second tier of, Chastain. I would throw Truex in there. And those might be the only guys I would take over him for the season. Just those 5.
I think I'd legitimately have him 4th at this point, behind Larson, Byron, Reddick.
It's a conversation for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was. I can't speak to whether it was his best race of all time because I didn't watch a lot of NASCAR intently in 2017 and 2018, his first couple of seasons. But it would have to be, at the very least, probably his second best victory. The only one that I can really remember that would compete with it for me would have been his first win when he outdueled Harvick at Pocono. But he definitely drove the best race yesterday. He deserved it. I mean, the car was there for him. He wasn't the fastest car. I think Bell probably had the fastest car and then screwed it up as he usually does. But it was there, and that helped him. But it was certainly maybe the best mental effort of his career, because for once he didn't kind of let any of the adversity that happened get to him, which it wasn't anything too bad that happened. But he did have to deal with the fact, and I was wondering if when we get a chance to bring this up, he passed Byron at least 3 or 4 times for the lead on the track and kept losing it on pit road just because William Byron had the number 1 pit stall that was gifted to him by the metric based on what happened at Darlington and, you know, the point standings or whatever, which I was actually going to bring up, that they had reverse records. Byron was 2-7 in lead changes for the race, and those 2 lead changes that he did have in the positive were when he was basically just passing FRM cars that had stayed out on old tires on restarts that were basically gimmies. And so otherwise he took the lead just because he had the first pit stall on pit road 6 different times, and all 6 times he eventually lost the lead. Meanwhile, Blaney had a 7-2 lead change record. And to take the lead 7 times in one race, no matter what, is a huge accomplishment. It takes a lot of skill and a lot of fortitude to do that. And, you know, if you want to say that was his best win, it may very well have been. It was well-deserved, and he's definitely been well ahead of his teammates at Penske. I always thought last year that the whole narrative that Penske was really, not really bad, but just was slow last year, was overrated, but this year you can't really dispute it, which I thought last year it was kind of just Cindric being a rookie and making them look worse than they really were, but they're clearly lacking this year, and it's very impressive what he's doing. I mean, like Murb said, I don't know if I would consider him a rock-solid threat or anything, but he's definitely going to be at least a second tier, and good chance he ends up as a top 5 driver for the season.
Safe to say at this point that RFK is the fastest Ford team?
Maybe.
I can see that. I don't know. Like, Buescher's been really disappointing to me.
I think Penske will bounce back, but for this year,
yeah, I don't know.
I mean, like,
yeah, Buescher had a really good run, honestly. So
Brad's basically been outrunning Joey for a lot of the year, and we know he's not better than Joey at this point in his career.
Yeah.
I think, like, it's definitely close between RFK and Penske. I was going to say, like, I think Buescher has kind of taken a step back this year compared to what he was doing last year. I think he's still been fine. Like, I don't think he's, like, you know, I'm not putting him in, like, Briscoe's category by any stretch, but I still think RFK is, like, a few years away. Like, they just need kind of, like, a superstar guy to build around. And once they do that, like, they're going to be 2311 Trackhouse level. Like, oh, this is, like, the hot, young, uprising team. So I think they're kind of, like, in the, I don't know. They're just, like, they're a few years away from that, I feel like. But as far as, like, right now, I definitely think it's a conversation. Brad, I really didn't. I thought Brad would be pretty good this year, but he's been better than I thought, for sure.
Yeah.
Good thing Jack's not here.
Yeah. Well, I'll add my thoughts on this whole matter. As for Blaney, let me just say that real quick. With the qualification that I have probably not watched every race since he's been running. I will say, just in recent memory, in all the races that I've seen, this is the best race I've ever seen from Blaney because he did lead the most laps. He did have a 7-2 lead change record. That was impressive, right? and it was just a considering the relative slowness of Penske lately, and he's been doing great, and I would say that this is sort of like, maybe the capstone to the season is probably not the right way to put it, since we're only a third of the way through, but it is truly a great performance, and certainly one of the best races of his career. And then as for his chances this season, I mean, he's second in the standings right now, so it's something you don't really get to see anymore because everyone just posts the playoff grid as it runs. But he certainly does have the second most points, and that's it's nothing to sneeze at. With all that's been said, and with all that we know about the season so far, he's someone I could definitely see going deep into the playoffs. Easy round of 8. I mean, that's kind of a gimme. Maybe even round of 4.
And we all know how good he is at Phoenix too.
Yeah. Actually, just now, this may not be 100% accurate since I've been I've mentioned a couple times on Twitter. I just made a change to formula with did something with the passing metrics to kind of equalize pass differentials, because some races have a lot more passing than others. But what I have right now, this is actually Blaney's highest TDR score ever. He had a 321 yesterday, and that is accurate because that was after the change. I just haven't gone back and done the old season or even races earlier this year yet, which is why I don't have the season table up yet. But previously, his high score was the 2018 Daytona 500, where he had a 287. I was surprised it wasn't I would have, just based on the eye test, that his best race yesterday was that Texas race in 2020 that he dominated before Quinn Houff happened.
Yeah.
But, I think I can now agree with you guys that was the best Blaney race ever.
I mean, This was his 8th career win, and I feel like he
feels like it should be more.
He could have double that based on how he's performed. He could have 15, 16 probably. Because you think about all those races in 2018, the Daytona 500. That one for me is a guy that likes him. That one stung. Especially with how it ended. But
yeah, but I think also in that one, I mean, he just led all that because everybody was single file. So I don't put a lot of stock into that.
Right, that's true. But then that Texas one, there's a bunch of Texas races that he's been awesome and then just never worked out.
Well, Bristol races too, where he got wrecked by lapped cars while he was leading.
Yeah. And he's kind of gotten this reputation over the past few years of he's 1 or 2 wins a year, and that's kind of it. Obviously, he went winless last year, but probably one of the better recent winless seasons, I would say. With how he was performing. But he really reminds me a lot of he's kind of post Roush, Kurt Busch to me, where you kind of know what to expect. I'm saying to this point, I have no idea. He could very easily like I said earlier, this win could easily be a launch pad to something completely, upper. I don't think he'll ever be the best driver in the sport, but I wouldn't rule out him, for the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years being kind of just a hair behind, Larson, Elliott. I put Reddick in there, Chastain, whatever you want to say, Byron, obviously now. Yeah, I think he's probably in that next tier after that right now, and who knows, maybe he could keep going higher.
That he kind of reminds me of is Carl Edwards in a way, just in that he's can be inconsistent and maybe sometimes dependent on certain factors, but it's there's potential there that he can just rip off a 6 or a 7 win season if everything goes right for him, and then.
And I think for him to do that, he would need Penske to be the fastest team again, what they had in. You put current Blaney in 2014, 2015 Penske. I think that's where you're starting to be okay, this is a dude that could win 6 or 8 races in a season.
Yeah. It's just he just kind of has those same sort of streaky tendencies, I guess, that Edwards had a lot of.
Yeah, I can see that.
I definitely think he can, and maybe he already is getting better at being more consistent and being able to run well no matter what's around him. So
yeah. I agree to everything. Especially especially the last season. I mean, remember there was the whole deal about whether he would miss the playoffs despite being like second or third in the standings at the time because there were so many winners last year, and I remember it would I mean the playoffs are the playoffs, right? But it would have been sort of an injustice if he had not at least had the number, the ranking by his name in the season end standings, at least being among the top 16, right? And it worked out that he got it, and with an assist from Kurt Busch, his unfortunate injury, but he's definitely it's. I don't know. He might have sort of a Ricky Rudd-esque win column if you look at his seasons, right? But I do like the Carl Edwards comparison. He just needs a better car, just a slightly faster car, and he could be popping them off at a much higher rate.
All right. What should we talk about next? Yes.
I mean, I guess
we sort of touched on Corey LaJoie already, but
should we talk about the race?
We could talk about the race as a whole. We might, because I thought, I think we're all agreed that it was one of the, at least racing wise, one of the better races of the season.
Might even say my favorite of the season.
Yeah.
Yes, putting drama aside, but and the rain delay.
Oh, of course.
But I mean, just I go on about it all the time. But these endurance races, these changing track condition races. This is what NASCAR is all about to me. Is just being able to survive and stay up there till the end of the race, and it's the type of racing that to me, this kind of hard to figure out what to say, but you know what I mean. Just
well, there was lots of comers and goers, which was great, right?
Yeah.
And there was constants, and then there was variables, right? And I meant Chris Book. Let's see here. Bell is who I'm thinking of, right? He had his sort of his moment, and then he sort of went away after a while. Yeah, William Byron the number one pit stall, making its best effort to win the race on behalf of William Byron, and not quite getting there. You had he had all sorts of things, right? He had Truex, right? Again, he had a very very strong run, didn't quite pull it off, and it's. That's a nice thing about these long races. Like you really have time for these sort of storylines to develop over the course of 3 to 4 hours. And if you have a rain delay, even longer than that.
The word I'm looking for is cinematic. It's like watching a movie. You have your build up and your climax, and at the end there's a winner. A resolution.
Mm-hmm.
It's it's all about sort of the process of getting there, as opposed to just pull things over before you can even say that you had a full sort of experience. I'll always love this race, and really glad that it feels like the Coke 600 again after that kind of sort of a stretch where it was boring and everyone was saying shorten the Coke 600, or the Charlotte Oval just puts on terrible racing.
It really is. It really is nice to see that the Charlotte Oval is back, right? Because when I started watching NASCAR, it was just sort of at its nadir of racing quality, especially with the car of tomorrow. It was just not putting on a good racing product. I remember saying last week that someone was asking when the All-Star race started losing its luster, and I said when Charlotte did, and like that's basically how it was, and it was right around that time. And I mean, I think it was maybe you, Murb, who said that the 2009 All-Star race. I'm not trying to switch the subject. I'm just pointing out a race that was there.
The All-Star race.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Shout out Larry Mack.
The All-Star. Yeah, the All-Star race in 2009 was like the last one where it was sort of a big event. At least that's what you said. And but now you've got. I mean, we've had two really great Coke 600s in a row, and you know, we even have Dale Jr. out there saying, I don't necessarily agree with him, but that we should scrap the Roval and just have two oval races again. I would be fine with just having two oval races there and the Roval. Someone mentioned having
That's
possibly, yeah. Some
That was me, actually.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Someone mentioned having like
an oval race. There should be the finale. I mean, it's NASCAR's backyard.
Well, yeah, exactly.
It makes just so much sense that why haven't they done this yet?
Well,
Because West Coast Utopia is why.
Yeah, like especially because these teams now only have one off week for the whole season, and that's like insane.
Ridiculous.
For them to go basically like 38 weeks in a row, you know, and then obviously, you know, they're working during the off season too. It's not like they're vacationing. You know, I'm talking about the people that like the road crews and people that work in the shop and all that. So, like, it's the only place, you know, I'm typically one of those people that's like, we need to be going to as many different places as possible, if possible. But it's Charlotte now, after seeing these last two Coke 600s, it's the one place where I would be absolutely, like, yeah, I would love a third Charlotte race. Like, I think the Roval is one of the best ideas that they've done over the past 20 years of NASCAR, and I think it's been a resounding success. I know last year's race sucked, but it's like the Bowman Gray of short tracks. It's like it's always going to have this, like, insane energy.
Bowman Gray of short tracks?
I mean, Bowman Gray of short tracks, yeah.
I think Bowman Gray is the Bowman Gray of short tracks.
Right. Yes, that Nadeau had several strong runs at Dover.
Yeah, Bowman Gray is actually the LA Coliseum of short tracks. That's what I meant to say. But anyway, I don't know. As far as like my thoughts on the race, I kind of had an interesting experience with this race because I was busy doing like Memorial Day stuff yesterday, so I didn't see it live. And then I got home like right around midnight, and I saw that FS1 was like starting their like encore presentation, and so I got to see the chopped up, like highly edited version that would make ESPN Classic blush. So that was an interesting experience. So there's a lot of like context of the race that I'm lacking because it was like heavily edited. I mean, I didn't even like literally the way they did, like they didn't even show the Chase and Denny crash. Like I come back from commercial and it's like Denny's getting interviewed and he's like, yeah, Chase right hooked me, and then they showed the replay, so I'm like, oh, I guess that happened. Like weird that they didn't include that. But so anyway, there's a lot of like context that I'm missing, you know, within this race. But they did show a lot of like the green flag racing, which I appreciated, and it looked exactly like last year. And last year, even despite the shit show at the end, was my favorite race of last year. And I echo what you guys said. Like, it's so cool to have Charlotte be back like this because it really was, you know, it's an important track, I think, for NASCAR. And like there were so many classic races there in like the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and it feels like we're back to that, and it feels good. And I think it's one of the best two tracks that we've seen. I would put Kansas as well in this.
Yeah,
I think
there you go.
Charlotte and Kansas have been the two best tracks with this car so far, I think, and that's I think by a pretty wide margin, I would say that. So
yeah,
it's so astounding that we're saying that. If we'd said that 8 years ago or something, or 5 years ago.
That. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for me, that race.
I don't think Charlotte got like terrible until like the late 2010s. There were some still pretty decent 600s in the early 2010s to me.
Yeah.
I guess it's just been a Gen 6 thing, I guess. I thought the car tomorrow there raced. I mean, that 2009 All-Star race.
Yeah.
I love that. Like, that's kind of becoming the new 2014 Chicago on Twitter now. I saw that clip probably leading up to the All-Star race this year, like probably 3 or 4 different times that week.
Yeah, that race definitely would be a top tier one for me this season. I don't know where I would rank it exactly. It didn't have quite the thrills that last year's race did. It wasn't just quite as just fast-paced excitement every minute like last year was throughout the green flag racing, but it was still very, very solid, very good with lots of passing, decent amount of action for the lead. And I was actually worried about it going into it because the weather, I live not real close to Charlotte, but not terribly far from it either. And the weather was absolutely horrible this weekend. Like the coldest that it's ever been this late in the year, and just rainy. And, so far with this package and this race car, that has not been a good combination at all for it to be cool and cloudy. And so I really thought, I actually wanted this race to be postponed to Monday because the temperature barely even got to 60, I think, on Sunday. And it did, sure enough, rain it out. And then the temperature was at least somewhat warmer on Monday. I think it got to like 71. And we even saw some sun pop out here and there. And so that still gave a little bit of the effect of having the track transitioning and changing throughout the event, especially with also the rain delay that happened in the middle. That kind of, it held it off for just long enough to where the race pretty much ended at night anyways, even though it looked like it was going to be an all-day race. And so that definitely helped. We saw 3 grooves of racing right from the get-go, which I was very surprised by, very pleasantly so. And it was very good. And like I said, it didn't have the thrills maybe that last year did, but it had something that last year's race didn't have, which was a good ending, or at least an acceptable ending. We didn't have any bullshit like we had last year that basically ruined the whole thing. Now, I thought about the 3/4 mark that we were heading in that direction because, just steadily as the race went on, we seemed to have more and more rather dumb incidents, and then especially with about 70 or 60 to go, we just started to have this rash of caution flags one right after the other. And it was like, oh, Lord, is this going to happen again? But thankfully, they managed to run the last 20 laps or so green. And so that was very good. I am going to pump the brakes on this whole, removing the Roval and running just the oval thing. Because, I don't believe in mortgaging the whole future based on, the feel-goods of a certain trend. The racing on intermediates will probably remain solid, but it's probably not going to stay this good forever. Whereas the racing at road courses and what it was at short tracks last year can only really go up. It's going to get better. So I'm not for that, but I am glad to see, as you guys said, Charlotte, which basically you could say is my home track and the home track for all these race teams, be good again. I mean, it just adds a level of prestige to the event when it's actually good. Now, I've talked about this the last couple of times we've talked about the 600. It just did not feel like a marquee event anymore, like an exciting thing, because there were so many duds just one right after the other. There was just no excitement for me around this event. But now these last 2 have kind of brought it back. And I kind of got that same kind of vibe going into the race when we had the ceremonies and you have the bagpipes playing Amazing Grace, and then you taps. You have all the military ceremonies beforehand. You get hyped for it, and the racing actually lives up to that feeling. And that's such a nice thing. And, as you guys said, Charlotte, it might have been the worst intermediate track for years. Like, it just, to be blunt, ever since basically, I would say 2011, for the most part, it just sucked balls. I mean, it just really did. Every race, pretty much, after a certain point, you just went into it thinking, well, how much is this one going to suck? And sometimes wouldn't be as bad as others, but at the end of the day, it would still suck. And that's why, the fall race got booted, which was very from the oval, which was very unpopular, especially when they ran it at night. And so I'm still not for removing that race, but I would definitely like to see 2 oval races, just not at the expense of the Roval. But I'm very excited about that. I did not honestly think that Charlotte would ever be good again because it was just like Groundhog Day with this racetrack, every race being so bad. But this car has been the fix so far, and I'm very happy about that.
As far as like the whole, should the Roval stay thing, something I saw on Twitter, somebody posted on Twitter earlier about like, what if we replace the Charlotte Roval with the Charlotte Oval, but then like turn Texas into basically like a permanent Roval? I think that might be interesting because they're definitely going to do something with Texas, and we all know. I mean, Texas as it is right now is a lost cause. Place?
Yes.
But I don't know. That could be something too. Because being realistic, I don't think they're going to do a third Charlotte race. So I don't know. That could be maybe an alternative, but
I could see
either way. Like I definitely am starting to feel like okay, like one race per year, and we're producing this level of racing at the Charlotte Oval right now. We're only going there once per year. That kind of feels like blue balls in a way. So I don't know. I'd love to see them figure something out to get maybe another race there. Even like send the All-Star race back there and get a Wilkesboro points race would be cool. So
yeah, I think there's a very small outside possibility they could do it now, just because I think maybe for a while that they had just this kind of taboo around having 3 races at one track in a year. But in 2020, when we had the COVID affected schedule, we had that. True, yeah, we had what I think technically you could say 3 races at Daytona. We had 3 races at Darlington. So I'm not going to say it absolutely can't happen because this administration at least seems to be more open-minded than the previous, brainless Ryan period. But probably not going to happen. But I'd like to see it. Not, it's a catch-22 because I'm with you. I would like to see more races at this track as it is now. But the odds of it staying this good are not as good as the Roval getting better than it was last year. So you have to weigh those things.
I would say just maybe as sort of a wrap up to this Charlotte discussion, whether it gets another oval race or not, which I would certainly like to see it get another oval race, especially, when there seems to be a trend to have more tracks and then, take away second dates from a lot of racetracks. I would just say that Charlotte as a racetrack has such tremendous symbolic value for the NASCAR community because of reasons we've already talked about, being the home racetrack, being, in the southeast part of the United States, and also being a very relatively old racetrack, that to have good racing there is just sort of a rising tide that lifts all ships. It's really there's no downside to the trends of the racing we've been seeing at Charlotte, and I'm all for it. I am all for it. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Anything else we need to touch on, or can we go into?
I assumed you guys wanted to discuss Indy. Now, I'm not going to bother talking about. I'm not going to bother talking about Monaco because there's nothing to talk about there. It's just the same thing that's been going on in F1 this year. And if you want to know about it, you can just look at the highlights. I'm not going to talk about it, but I assume you guys want to talk about Indy. So
it's the 3 dragons meme where like the two dragons are like all scary looking, and then the third one's got like googly eyes and its tongue stuck out. That's the Monaco race. Is that third dragon?
I did not watch.
Indy, which I'll give a quick shout out to our friend Jack, Jimmy 48 fan who's been on here a couple times. He was there and had a great time. Just wanted us to say on his behalf that it was the greatest sports moment he's ever witnessed live in person. So I guess I'll say that even with the kind of contrived ending, I was really happy to see Newgarden win. Much more preferable than Ericsson, who would have won without that last restart, but certainly better than Ferrucci. I mean, we did not need that for a number of reasons, but Newgarden originally was my favorite driver when I first got into IndyCar on a more frequent basis in, I guess, around 2016 or so, because he had that accident at Texas where, like, there was the whole thing with the foam that nearly decapitated him or something like that, and then he came back the very next race and won at Iowa. I thought that was really cool, and he was like not in that good of a car yet, so became kind of my main guy. I guess nowadays it's Pato O'Ward, but still really cool to see Newgarden win that, and now he doesn't have to worry about, he's never won the 500 or anything like that. And I thought up until the rash of late race NASCAR-itis of everybody losing their brains, I thought it was a pretty good race.
Yeah. I thought it was a good race. Like, I don't know. I did think it was a good race, but in a way it was also kind of a microcosm of, I guess, a few things that have annoyed me about the Indy 500 in recent years, which is where it's like, basically for the first 3 quarters, it'll just be like a fuel derby, and like everybody's saving fuel, and like I think that like increases specifically like the lead changes. I think the lead changes are kind of inflated because of that. At least this year, I will say, it was better than last year, where it was just like the Ganassi teammates kept swapping the lead over and over with each other. This year, at least, I think there was a little bit more like natural racing because it wasn't teammates. There was no team order stuff going on, whatever. But overall, like, I thought it was a good race, and yeah, echo everything Ryan said about Newgarden. He's the best IndyCar driver since Scott Dixon to come out, and just feels like this is kind of like that one last thing he needed to do to be seen as like, okay, this is, one of
just
the best
stupid
IndyCar drivers ever. That's just how they do it.
It makes more sense than, saying a NASCAR driver doesn't have a complete career without a Daytona 500, but it's still stupid.
Yeah, well, I mean, the reason why is because they've gone through so many different, like, sanctioning bodies and, the split and all that. Like, it's always been, like, the one race that's kind of, like, remained a constant, I guess, Mm-hmm. And it's, I mean, it goes back to, like, 1911, 1909, when the Speedway was built, I think, or whatever, so, I don't know, it's one of those things, like, I guess I understand why they do that, like, why the Indy 500 to everybody, like, unanimously means more than, like, a series championship, but, yeah, coming from, like, the NASCAR side of things, it's definitely a little bit wonky, like, if you're not familiar with that or whatever, but I don't know. I'm happy for Newgarden. I've been a fan of him for the most part his entire career. Kind of cooled on him a little bit more lately, just because like you mentioned Pato. Like I'm a big fan of like Pato and specifically Pato and some of these other younger guys like David Malukas now he's really young, but I guess there's just like other IndyCar drivers that have.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's just not really as fun to root for the guy who's sort of the establishment, so to speak.
Yeah, I guess maybe that's part of it.
Pato basically right now is what Newgarden was in 2016.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I only saw the second half of the race. I was busy catching up for whatever reason on Monaco after I got up and I recorded that. But I did see the second half, and it looked like a pretty good race by today's standards at IndyCar, like post DW12. Now, nothing will ever top that era of racing for me as far as IndyCar goes. That era of racing on ovals, the 2013 Indy 500. I'm a NASCAR fan, but I will honestly say the 2013 Indianapolis 500 is the best race that I've watched live. There to me, it would be almost impossible for anything to top that. But after some years of some not good races, it's gotten a bit better recently. And I liked most of what I saw. I can't speak to the first half of the race, but the second half was pretty good until it devolved and looked like it was going to be like a NASCAR race, except even worse because we don't they don't have a green white checker to sort everything out in IndyCar, and it almost ended in the most ridiculous fashion possible, where they all wrecked on that. Sorry, this thing's pegged here for some reason, and they wrecked on that restart, and it looked like that was going to be the end of the race. Like literally a 5-second exchange that happened where Ericsson got past, but that wasn't how it ended, thankfully. And Newgarden, I'm not crazy about his personality myself, and also, for what relatively little I watch, I'm also a Pato Award supporter. Pato. I got it right this time. Supporter of him. I like him. He seems like a really fun guy, easy person to root for. And he had a good chance to win it, but unfortunately he overcompensated for last year, where he was too conservative and he kind of wussed out trying to get past Ericsson on the last lap last year. And this year he kind of, I think they already had some kind of run-in at the track already before the race that was going on. They were stewing over that he was maybe already mad about. And so he tried to go in probably prematurely and make a pass on the inside with 7 laps to go that maybe he shouldn't have. I'll maintain that I think Ericsson shoved him down basically into the grass and was still ultimately responsible for it, but Award should have been more patient there, especially with the fact he was on fresher tires, and and he was really pissed off afterwards because he said that next time I need to just take him with me. I think he resents the fact that he gave him the win last year, and then he feels like he can't win because this time he's aggressive, and then he loses then too. So I definitely understand that. But Newgarden deserved it. He did everything he needed to do at the end. He almost got screwed out of it with that caution flag thing, but thankfully for him, it worked out. And for someone to be that good for that long, he needed to have that in reserve. He didn't need to have it, but you know what I'm saying. He really needed to have that, to just get all those questions and get all that bull crap away, and just say that he won it. Because the Indy 500, whether it's fair or not, is an event that a lot of people hold as being more important than the championship. That's hard for us to really imagine in NASCAR or in a lot of other racing series, but people, put this race up on a pedestal, and some consider it as bigger than winning a title. So, it's a good thing for him, good accomplishment, and, not much more to say.
Yeah. I got something to say. Just thank all that is holy that tire that came off of either Kirkwood or Rosenquist's car that
Kirkwood.
I mean, when I saw that happen and I saw that tire go flying, that was just like one of the most heart-stopping moments I've ever had as a race fan. And thank everything that it missed the grandstands. I thought at first it went right in, or it was going right in, and so. Yeah,
certainly a frightening moment.
Absolutely unthinkable possibility of what could have happened with that.
Well, I'll just add my little bit. As someone who's basically NASCAR xenophobic, right? I don't really watch IndyCar at all, but of course, for an event this big, if I'm able to, I will. And so I caught, I guess, like the last 2/3 of it, because I was somewhere else, and I checked my watch, and it was I was starting in 10 minutes, but I wasn't able to get back until like 45 minutes later. But it was a good race. I mean, it's Indy cars do put on a great show at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway as per usual. And it was once again sort of a piece with Charlotte, in which there was a lot of different storylines, right? You had one thing no one's mentioned so far, but the comeback of Alex Palou from having an incident in the pits of where his front wing got knocked off, right? And like of course the commentators were saying, and he's out, right? And of course, they replaced it, and he came back in a stunning fashion, and actually finished fourth, right? And he was right up there at the end. Yeah, there's all sorts of things to talk about. Of course, Newgarden. It's good to have him get that box checked, so to speak. And yeah, the three. I will say, the 3 red flags within the last 20 laps were just comical, right? Just a reminder that NASCAR isn't the only series with.
I was going to say, I just need to chime in for just a second and just say
Yeah,
that it's good that. Sorry, I just want to make this one point, and I promise I won't step on your toes anymore. I'm glad that after all these years of condescension from open wheel fans about how pure their sport is and how much better they are at NASCAR and all these things, that now we're seeing all this. I mean, it's not a good thing, but I'm just from a standpoint of being a NASCAR fan, where F1 is literally just throwing out red flags and safety cars now like they're candy, and now Indy car doing this in their sport, it puts a real stick in all those claims that they're somehow much more, shall we say, cultured or proper than we are. So I just had to say that.
Sure, and I mean that was essentially what I was going to say. It was just like each of these racing series has their own sort of officiating quirks, and NASCAR is certainly not alone, even though it may have quite a few of its own gimmicks. So, but go on.
It was definitely chintzy having those, especially the last red flag. But as the resident, finish under green at all costs guy here, I can't exactly complain about it. I mean, if there's of course your conspiracy people out there saying that Penske just wanted one of his guys to win, and but I think in the past even the second to last restart would not have happened, and Newgarden was leading on that. So
right. That was so dumb. I couldn't, yet I also could believe that people were doing that. Like, really?
People just want to, come up with a conspiracy for everything. So
he wanted to sweep the weekend, even though he hadn't won at Charlotte yet, right?
Yeah.
So
I guess so.
Yeah.
Oh, I just want to say one last thing. Is it just me? I don't watch again IndyCar that often, but Townsend Bell just is the most unlikable prick of an announcer.
Townsend Boyer.
Yeah.
He's not one of my favorites by any means.
No. I like Hinch in the booth, but yeah.
Oh, Hinch is great. I thought they had that little argument about somebody lost a tire and it went out of the pit stall. And those two had a major argument on the air.
It got heated.
Yeah, he and Clint Boyer need to just, get a room together, have some drinks, and, let the real experts do the talking on the broadcast.
Yeah. Well, I don't really have a opinion on that strongly, actually. I mean, I don't know, but it was a good, it was a good race. I'm not going to add anything else, so I'll just speak right now.
Might as well just preview next week then if we have nothing to talk about.
Sure.
So, Gateway. If I had to, predict anything about it, we'll probably see the same guys we've seen in most of the flat track races, the short track races. So, guess this will be weekend where Stuart Haas shows up again, or
I was going to say Briscoe.
Yeah. I mean, knowing us and our tendency for drivers winning races right after we go off on them would be the most PRC podcast thing ever if Briscoe wins this week. But I'm gonna go with the guy while he's hot. I'm gonna say Ryan Blaney back to back.
I almost did that. I was thinking that a few weeks ago, kind of previewing the next handful of races, and I was like, again, going back to what we were saying earlier about what Blaney's been doing recently, I was like, I think Gateway could be a one. Because remember last year, I thought he was the best car, and then Hassler, they did. There's a whole strategy mix-up, and I know
he blew a tire.
Was that it? I can't totally remember.
Blew a tire while he was like charging up through the field on new tires.
Yeah. Okay. But so yeah, like I was thinking that a few weeks ago, but now he's got this like 600 win, and so I'm thinking like, I don't know, could he go back to back? He certainly can. Like if he has that speed last year and or I should say the same speed as last year, and you know if they could obviously put the whole race together, and you know that has been one of my critiques of Blaney is that he does like let adversity kind of take him down a notch. So they have to put the whole race together. You know, that's the thing. But I'm not going to pick him. I'm actually going to pick Bell. And so last year on this podcast, leading into Gateway, I was hyping Bell super hard, and he didn't do anything there, really, to my knowledge, that I remember. But this year, I still think it's going to be largely Ford dominated, like what you're saying. I do think we'll see Stuart Haas show up. This will probably be maybe a Logano weekend. Maybe he isn't as bad, although who knows? I really don't know what is going on with him. Even if Penske's bad, like he's been pretty bad. But I'm just thinking it's going to be like, I think we're going to see some strategy stuff like we've seen there, like we saw there last year, and really any race there. If you've watched like, you know, Xfinity or trucks there's always some sort of strategy stuff that happens. And so I'm just thinking about Bell, like his past two wins, specifically like Martinsville and Bristol Dirt, largely strategy assisted, we'll say. You know, he blasted through on new tires and won Martinsville, and then Bristol Dirt, he kind of got kept out there and held on. So I'm thinking it's going to be kind of like a Ford domination maybe, and probably like the Gibbs Toyotas too, but I don't know. For some reason, I just foresee that, like, Bell just, like, all of a sudden, just, like, Bell's going to win this race because, like, some strategy thing. I don't know.
Yeah. Please let it be easier to pass than it was last year when, like, McDowell was able to stay out for 20th on the tires and lead 30 laps.
I'll just add real quick, too. I've seen a lot of, like, maybe people aren't very clear on this, but it's not gonna be the short track package that we've seen at Phoenix and Martinsville. Like it's the same package as last year. So racing wise, unfortunately, I'm not sure we'll see too much difference. I'm just hoping it's gonna be like as good as last year and like as intriguing as last year, because last year exceeded my expectations. Like going into that weekend, I remember we were on the show here like shitting on it, like, oh, this is gonna suck, and then I think it kind of exceeded all of our expectations, so I'm just kind of hoping for that again.
Yeah, well, before this Corey LaJoie news came out, this was a race that I was thoroughly dreading for several different reasons, because one, I think this race is going to be mediocre at best. Like last year, I mean, we had some certain hijinks that happened that at least provide some good theater, but the on-track racing was left a lot to be desired. This is just not a track that is really designed for these kinds of cars, does not race well. And it, based on last year, is Hendrick's worst track, which hurts Corey and also hurts a couple of my other favorites. And there's he didn't mention him by name, but, you know, what Murb was saying about SHR, it's a damn good chance of a Harvick win, too. So that's three big marks against this week right there for me. But thanks to the Corey news, I'm not dreading it quite as much, but I still can't say I'm relishing it. And that's not really, I think, a controversial opinion, because I know from like hearing the stuff around the garage that the teams, which they don't really seem to like many racetracks or many places that they go to, but they especially seem to hate this place. Like, no one wants to be at this racetrack. No one likes the area around it. They don't like the track itself. They don't like the facilities, the amenities, whatever. It's just kind of a week I think everyone likes to get over as fast as possible. So, you know, I guess the track has done a good job of marketing itself, and that's why it's got its date. No other real explanation for it. But
I was going to say, we better get used to it because it's going to be here for a while. Because they have been selling that place out for a few years now, like, regardless of what series. Like, even, like, the truck races and stuff.
Yeah, a bunch of lame Cardinal fans. But, yeah, but it is what it is. We just got to deal with it and put up with it the best we can and hope that it's better than we expect to be. And, if we set our expectations low, then, well, it won't be too bad. Yeah, partly because I think it's something that legitimately can happen, but also partly because I seem to have placed a curse on anybody that I pick. I'm picking Kevin Harvick to win this race. At Phoenix, the previous time I picked him, he got within a gnat's ass of winning before Harrison Burton decided to take the win away from him. I've had two other instances where I picked Kyle Larson, and he's literally lost the race in the last half of the last lap. And I picked William Byron this last week, and he literally took the lead off of pit road 6 straight times and still didn't win the race. So I'm going to go with the theory that that curse will work in my favor, and so I'm going to pick him, hoping that it means he doesn't.
Boy, that's some gymnastics.
Yeah, that's what I do. That's how I roll, baby.
Corey LaJoy is going to avenge his last place finish from last year, and he's going to drive right to the front, and he's going to win.
Well, I'll tell you what, if that happens, I will. Well, I'm not. I would say one of the things that one of our community members, Schroeder, says, but I'd never be able to follow through on it. So let's just say I think there's about as much chance of that happening as me dating Scarlett Johansson tomorrow, but who knows? I mean, anything can happen in this world, I guess, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know.
You never know.
Mostly, probably the number one thing against that idea, and I did pick LaJoy for our fantasy game because I have nothing to lose in that, but like the number one thing that's going to work against LaJoy is obviously the fact that Hendrick did not do very well at this track at all last year, so that'll work against him. But I just try to be optimistic every once in a while, and maybe he'll actually be able to make something of this.
Yeah.
And I think as far as just a realistic expectation for him, if he just runs basically similar to like Bowman, I guess next week, or maybe even
that'll be interesting, because I know in our discussions before, I think we've kind of compared them, Corey and Bowman, as like talents. So I'm definitely interested to see how they do kind of against each other. Like, okay, is Corey maybe as good as Alex at least? I don't know. We'll have to see.
Yeah, I'm going to choose to be in my happy phase about for the next couple of days, and then this week this weekend is when I'll have my ulcer over it. So, because this is his chance. This may be the only chance he gets to really help himself get a better ride. At this point, he's been struggling for even longer than Ross Chastain had to. At this point, I mean, this guy was winning the K&N series and beating like Chase and Bubba and all these stars like in 2012, and this is 11 years later, and something's got to happen for him, and it needs to happen sooner rather than later. So I guess I'll probably be having my shitting attack Sunday morning, and then just pray that it all goes well after that.
Yeah, but again, I mean, I just want to be optimistic about his chances this weekend, and maybe not to win, but to run well. I mentioned this at the top of the show. I mean, he's been doing pretty great in Inspire's crap box this year. He's ranked 20th in points. I mean, that in itself is kind of mind blowing. And
and especially, I just want to say one thing. Just to say, not I mean, I'm biased, of course, but I mean, I'm for there being stage points, but that is something that kills guys like him and guys that race for these smaller race teams that often rely on just trying to grind out good finishes. He would probably be at least a few spots higher if it was not for stage points. That is something that just kills teams like that. But I digress.
Sure. Well, yeah. Either way, I won't even be able to watch the race this weekend, most likely for reasons, but it'll certainly be interesting. Hopefully, it's a slightly better product than last year. Although I don't even think I watched much of last year's race either. But Although, yeah, that's right. I listened to it on the radio, and then I heard about all the Denny Hamlin, Chase Elliott stuff. Or no, it was Ross Chastain.
Ross,
it was Ross Chastain versus both those guys. Yeah,
Chase was in there too.
yeah.
Ross against the world.
Yeah,
those three have to just be like sort of like perpetual circle of drama at this point. Like it's always Denny versus Ross or Denny versus Chase, or maybe throw Bubba in there too, like Bubba
Larson
versus
too lately with Ross.
Yeah, Larson. Oh, on that note, we didn't even talk about the Bubba and Almirola thing. Which
is there anything worth saying?
He just seemed like Almirola just being.
That was weird. Again, so like I said before, like I watched like the midnight replay, and like that was one of the things they included for some reason. Like they come back from commercial and they're like, check out this like video from the stands of Almirola pushing Bubba, and I'm like, what? Like over what? Like they didn't even show what happened on track. They just like showed that.
Apparently he was mad because like Bubba gave him the finger or said some mean words to him, and got his antics in a wad over that. But apparently shoving him is fine.
Yeah, it was just like he was trying to get by him on track, and then he Eric was trying to get by Bubba, and like he passed him. Bubba gave him the finger, and then so it was like. During the rain delay, he goes up to him and says, and this is from Amarola's own recounting in his interview, so you could just go listen to that. But then he goes up and asks him about it, and then according to Amarola, Bubba starts cussing him out, and so then he just shoves him. So whatever, just I don't it's barely a blip on my radar. It's just I don't really care.
Based on
just retired, dude.
Yeah, that too. Based on sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I thought Bubba's reaction to it was actually pretty good. Like, I was like, oh, thank God he didn't just like get back into it. He did what Larson did when Bubba did that to Larson. It's kind of like
there's no way for anybody to spin this into a Bubba can't control his temper type of thing. But sure, people will anyway.
As far as Eric goes, like I used to be like a pretty big fan of him, and then I don't know. I wish he could have just retired the way he wanted to instead of being forced back. And now it's like
really just feels like he's being strung along basically because Smithfield wants him there.
And now it's like
dude,
kind of
just
like
spend time with your family. Just say no.
Right, but see now it's like we're seeing some of these rumors about who might get that car next year. So it's sort of like, oh, I don't know, maybe Eric would be preferable. I don't know if he comes back. I don't know. That team is just. I cannot remember a more ineptly run, like powerhouse, quote unquote, supposed to be a powerhouse team like in NASCAR like recently. Like I would have to go back to like. Maybe Yates in like the mid 2000s. Like that's what Stewart-Haas feels like right now. I don't know.
Yeah, from what I know of it, the incident, it was a thing where they were kind of both acting like jerks. Like I mean, I certainly side more with Bubba in this particular instance, but you can't really deny that he does have a habit of kind of instigating things and stirring the pot and making things worse for himself and getting himself in situations he shouldn't. But
he definitely does.
But this particular case,
it's a blessing and a curse. But,
exactly.
That's how I
I
kind of
don't
look at
think
it.
he did anything wrong here.
The way I look at it, this was basically the same thing as when he kept flipping off Bowman, I think, like 2 weeks in a row, and at this same track, but at the Roval in 2019, and then Bowman, but instead of shoving him physically, Bowman just shoved him on the racetrack, and then Bubba paid him back with a nice Aquafina shower. But I digress.
Bowman was overheating, so he just wanted to cool him off.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's it.
Well, just briefly, I mean, we don't have to say a lot about it, but I mean, you want to go ahead and cover Sonoma?
I don't really.
It hasn't been on my radar.
Nah,
the thing that would happen would be Chase just comes back and makes a statement, but
and I think there's a legitimate possibility of that. Like I think there's a huge chance because I think there's been a lot of debate about the road courses. Like, oh, is Reddick like the new road course king now? and he's obviously amazing on them. But I still think Sonoma and Watkins Glen particularly are going to be like still the Hendrick show. So I think that's very possible that Chase will come back, and of course he's got to deal with his teammates like Larson and even Byron. I think what he's doing this year, he could easily go win some road races. But
it is the type of track where that injury might still be lingering a little bit. But Kyle Busch, 2015, right. He won there, so let's see history repeat itself. Hopefully with that.
Yeah, I just hope that this is actually a decent race because Sonoma, with the exception of 2021, has not been good in a long time. But
I think it will be because of the no stage breaks now. I think that's going to help a lot.
I was just about to say that. Yes, exactly. That was probably the biggest thing that killed it for the last several years when they instituted that. But that's going to be a curse lifted off of it, and it probably won't be as good as it has been in some pre-gen set 6 era or whatever races, but it should be better than last year probably is what I would expect.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I guess I'll say Larson is my preliminary pick for that. Because he's running the Xfinity race, and normally it seems like lately when he runs like trucks or Xfinity, he comes out and just like dominates the hell out of the Cup race too.
And North Wilkesboro, we didn't even talk about that at all, but
oh yeah.
That was
that was crazy.
He wasn't really that noteworthy other than Larson literally going from last to first in 30 laps or whatever it was.
That was like insane. That was one of the most insane things I've ever seen. Like even from him, like he's done a lot of amazing stuff like that, but even from him, I was just like, holy! I cannot believe he just did that. That was insane.
He's the only guy in the field that can do that, really.
Yeah, I think so, man. Like the more I watch of him, he's just like one of the best I've ever seen. Like you can't even argue against it at this point. It's unreal. Like jumping between so many different types of cars and just I don't know.
Yeah, for me, watching that sort of thing live, many ways very different, but same sort of vibe as watching Jimmy Johnson win his 7th title live. I'm just like, I'm actually seeing this just now, and this is going to be a moment that's talked about for a long time, right? Now, obviously, Johnson is on a different order of magnitude, but it's still like those moments that they're going to be talked about in the record books. It's just he topped it off and he won the thing, and honestly, it was a very fitting way for him to win his 3rd All-Star race. And
3 different tracks.
3 different tracks. That's right, and it seems unfair to give him that some sort of record and say, oh, he's the first one to do it at 3 different tracks when it's only been mainly at one track this entire time. But still, if anyone deserves such a sort of an arbitrary title, he does have that, and it would be him, right? He's just sort of this generational talent that we've got on our hands.
That was definitely like I've never seen. I guess like the only thing that almost compares to it was that time at Daytona when like Truex was way behind.
Oh my god!
Like had lost the draft and then somehow like all by himself caught up and then like passed everyone. So
yeah,
I think that was just. I think that was mainly because it was like E.J. Kennington or some really shitty shitbox driver who was like leading.
There's a name.
Yeah.
He wants. He never mind. I'm not going to say it. I was going to say something. I thought better of it. Yeah.
But I don't think it was Kennington because it was the July race, and I don't think Kennington has ever run that, or at least not recently. But
did that? It was 2018, but it was like some driver who never runs up front in like some really bad car who was leading, and that's how Truex was able to catch up. But
I'll be honest, I don't even remember this.
Yeah, no, I remember it. That was because I remember reacting to that live, and it was something else.
Yeah, really, what the Larson at Wilkesboro thing reminded me of was. It felt like something from the 90s, like at Wilkesboro, like people were like comparing it a little bit to like when Jeff Bodine lapped the field. I don't know if that's an accurate comparison really at all, but definitely just the way he drove through like that, you know, and that's what was cool about, I guess I'll just say about the Wilkesboro race in general. Like it felt like Wilkesboro. If you go back and watch those races from the 90s, like it's long runs. Of course, we have people like Gluck who were confused about, oh, there's not a bunch of cautions going on, but it's a short track. But like, that's how Wilkesboro always was like long green flag runs. I know there's we have Charlie, who's a member of our group here, and like him and I always pump up. It's the fall 1995 Wilkesboro race, and it had right in the middle of it. You know, it's a 400 lap race, and it had like a 300 and some odd lap green run. That's how that track always was. So it was cool to see that, and to see somebody of Larson's caliber just knife their way through the field and then take off like that was like on one specific run. It was crazy.
And the funniest part about that was, like, in our server chat, like, just before he did that, like, Eden, who's been on this before, said, wow, Larson's running in 21st. That's disappointing. And then and somebody else said, yeah, well, he wasn't that good in qualifying or the heat races, so I don't expect he'll be much of a factor. And so,
yeah.
I guess kind of wrap up on a bit of a couple tangents here, but yeah.
Well, that was good. Let's put a bow on it though, and good race, and we'll see what happens this weekend. And it's been as a season. I mean, I think 2023 is shaping up pretty well.
Yeah, it's definitely gotten better. It was a pretty humdrum start, but I think it's definitely improved quite a bit.
Yeah, definitely agree.
Yeah. Let's say this was probably one of my favorite episodes that we've recorded.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
Just hope that Chase Briscoe can recover from his finger energy, and that the race at the Bowman Gray of short tracks is an entertaining one.
Oh, and
that's right.
And don't forget the actions of one Denny Hamlin.
Oh, those detrimental actions.
Yeah. He'll finally be able to race at Gateway without spending the whole time trying to wreck somebody. So,
don't speak too soon on that one.
You know that if Chase had been allowed to race, that he would have, suddenly gone from Mr. Safety to Ross last year 2.0.
I assume that's all you guys got to say, so I'll just wrap it up here. I don't know exactly. I think we're going to do a show after Sonoma. I'm trying to work out the math in my head, the way the weeks work. We're definitely not going to do a show on the off week, because that would be an off week for us anyways. Like, we don't do shows most of the time back-to-back weeks. But after we have the off week and then have the next race after, I think, is Nashville. I think we may do back-to-back episodes, because in our order, we would do an episode after Nashville, but probably do a shorter one, because after the 18th race of the season, whatever that is, I don't even remember, that's the halfway point of the season, and I really would like for us to do kind of like a mid-season report kind of thing. Maybe we can get 5 guys for that, or maybe 4 again at least, and do a big smorgasbord kind of thing. But I'm not sure exactly what we're going to do. The odds are we'll do a show after Sonoma, but I've got to think about it. If this is it, then I guess we'll see you guys in a month or so. But if not, we'll see you after Sonoma. We'll probably have a total where we have an extra week off, but then do back-to-back shows, if that makes any sense, the way that it's looking right now. But for now, thank all of you guys for all of your support. Really means a lot to us. We appreciate it. Be sure, in addition to watching us here on YouTube, like and subscribe. Comment on us or on these videos, because that helps us more than anything in the algorithm. Follow us on Twitter at TRC Podcast 1. Be sure to follow Ryan on Twitter at RJM Analytics and look at his detailed statistics and analysis.
At this point, it's mainly just hot takes to try to grow my audience, I guess. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, that's
Yeah.
pretty much all you can do.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. But until next time, see you guys.